program is a woman with an extraordinary story, Irshad Manjid. One imam said that Manjid was more dangerous than Osama bin Laden. Why? Because she's a Muslim reformer who's trying to change her faith from within. A vocal, feminist, reform-minded, gay Muslim. Listen in to Manjid's fascinating tale. Talk about growing up in Vancouver in a Muslim household and going to a madrasa.
Well, my family and I are refugees from Idi Amin's Uganda, and we wound up on the precious soil of Canada in 1972. And that's where I grew up, attending two kinds of schools, Monday through Friday, the public school, and then every Saturday for several hours at a stretch, the madrasa. And that is where I began to ask, very simple questions. But those questions, including why can't Muslims take Jews and Christians as friends, angered my madrasa teacher. And at one point, at the age of 14, he said to me, look, either you believe or you get out. And if you get out for good. And I stood up and I walked out of the madrasa. And indeed, what I did every Saturday, now that I was no longer welcome at the madrasa and had 8 hours, to work with, I went to a secular institution called the Public Library, where I read everything I could about belief systems. And that, Fareed, is where I also discovered something that revolutionized my faith. I discovered that Islam has its own tradition of independent thinking and debate and dissent and reinterpretation. And it's a tradition known as ijtihad. Ijtihad. And what is so ironic, if not sad, is that I would have never learned about it at the religious school. A secular institution saved my faith in my faith.
What was it like when you realized that you were gay and had to try to reconcile that with your faith?
I really haven't struggled. And, my lack of struggle about being a gay Muslim really comes from the fact that I have deep faith in God. And this is not a God whom I fear. It is a God whom I love, and I believe loves me back. And what I find so ironic is that, even mainstream Muslims, especially mainstream Muslims, say that Allah is omniscient and omnipotent. He cannot make mistakes. He knows what he is doing. Great. Well, in that case, he knew that he was creating somebody like me. Did he make a mistake in doing so? Farida, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying let's have the humility to leave the final judgment to God himself.
You say it's very important not to sanitize Islam. Explain what you mean.
Well, I mean that moderate Muslims have a tendency to sanitize Islam. So, for example, the next time a bombing or beheading occurs, and God knows it will, the first thing you will hear from the mouth of a so-called moderate Muslim is, oh, no, please don't misunderstand. Islam has nothing to do with this. That's simply not true. Because most of the people doing these bombings and beheadings say that they're doing it in the name of Allah. And they actually cite verses from the Quran. So here's the thing. Religious symbolism does play a role that moderates are still not willing to own up to. Reformists own up to it, but we also acknowledge that Islam is being manipulated. It is being used. And that is why we are coming to the table as reformists with bold and competing reinterpretations of the Quran. And reinterpreting, I want to emphasize, is not the same thing as rewriting. It is rethinking the meanings of the words that already exist.
And to those who say, well, you are cherry picking, what do you say?
I say, yes, that's correct. And so are you, by not acknowledging the freedom-loving verses of the Quran. And so let us have diversity of interpretation within Islam. I could be wrong. You could be wrong. Maybe we'll both see each other in hell. Who knows? We won't know until we meet our Maker.
You make a point that I feel not enough people are aware of. So one of those famous points about Islam that you will hear across popular media everywhere is that the Quran promises a martyr in the name of Islam, 72 virgins. Is that true?
It is not true. Nowhere in the Quran does it promise 72 virgins, 70 virgins, 48 virgins. What it promises, as far as heaven goes, is something lush. And, there was a few years back a controversy over a scholar who came to the conclusion that the Arabic word for virgin has been mistranslated. That the original word that was used in the Quran was the word for raisin, not virgin. In other words, that martyrs would get raisins in heaven, not virgins. And some would laugh out loud saying, how in the heck could this be possible? Why raisins? Well, remember, in the 7th century, the desert of what is now Saudi Arabia would have been a place that is dry enough that something like a raisin would have been pricey and would have been a heavenly delicacy. So it is entirely possible that the Quran has been mistranslated to give this impression of virgins being delivered to martyrs in heaven. I don't buy it, and there's nothing in the Quran that suggests 72, that's for sure.
Don't miss my new special, Why They Hate Us, on Monday night at 9 p.m. We'll introduce you to radicals and reformers, angry Muslim activists, and angry American politicians. We'll dig into how Islam got to this point and how many Muslims are there out there who want to kill us.